Lieutenant Frank Morrison counted his ammunition one more time, hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. 18 Americans, 11 rifles with mixed ammunition, 2 Thompson submachine guns with a combined 60 rounds, 12 grenades, and 65 German soldiers in fortified positions across the factory courtyard, waiting for dusk to begin their assault. The mathematics were simple. When the Germans charged, they would overwhelm the American position in minutes. Morrison's men could kill perhaps 15 or 20 before the ammunition ran out. Then it would be bayonets and rifle butts until the survivors surrendered or died. Morrison was 26 years old. He had been a high school history teacher in Virginia before the war. He had taught his students about the Alamo, about Thermopylae, about desperate last stands that became legends. He had never expected to be inside one. Then a quiet voice from the corner of the ruined building spoke up. Private First Class Robert Garrett, a replacement who had joined the platoon 3 weeks earlier, said 4 words that would save every man in that room. "Sir, I can throw." What happened over the next 40 minutes would be studied by infantry officers for the next 80 years. It would change how the Army thought about individual skills and combat applications. It would prove that sometimes the most devastating weapon on a battlefield is a talent developed in complete peacetime. But first, Morrison had to decide whether to trust a replacement with an 80-foot arm and a claim that sounded like desperate fantasy. To understand why Garrett's offer mattered, you need to understand the problem with grenades in 1944. The standard American fragmentation grenade, the EMP-2, was an effective weapon within its design parameters. It weighed 21 ounces. When thrown and detonated, it produced lethal fragments within a 15-foot radius and dangerous fragments out to 30 feet. Against infantry in the open, it was devastating. The problem was delivery. The average American soldier could throw a grenade accurately to about 35 feet. With effort, some could reach 50. Beyond that distance, accuracy collapsed. The grenade would land short, or wide, or in a position that gave the enemy time to kick it away or dive for cover. At ranges past 50 feet, a grenade became a psychological weapon rather than a lethal one. It made noise and created fear, but it rarely killed. The German positions across the courtyard were 60 to 90 feet away. They were behind rubble piles and broken walls, protected from rifle fire by angles that Morrison's men couldn't overcome. The only way to dig them out was with grenades thrown directly into their positions. And nobody in the platoon could throw that far with any accuracy. Nobody except Garrett. Robert Garrett had spent 8 years in the minor leagues, pitching for teams in Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri. He had a fastball clocked at 94 miles per hour, which put him in the top tier of minor league talent. He had never made it to the majors, not because he lacked the arm, but because he couldn't hit well enough to justify a roster spot. When the war started, he was 27 years old, working in a factory, and watching his baseball dream fade into memory. The Army drafted him in 1943. Basic training taught him to throw grenades the way everyone else threw them, with a stiff-armed motion designed to maximize distance over accuracy. Garrett had tried to explain that this was wrong, that a proper throwing motion from the shoulder and elbow would give better control and comparable distance. The drill sergeants hadn't been interested in pitching mechanics. They had quotas to meet. Now trapped in a factory ruin outside Bastogne, Garrett's knowledge suddenly mattered. He explained to Morrison that a grenade weighed roughly the same as a baseball. The grip was different, and the release point needed adjustment, but the fundamental mechanics were identical. If he could stand up long enough to get a proper throwing motion, he could put a grenade through a window at 80 feet. He had spent a decade putting baseballs through windows at 60 feet 6 inches. This was just a longer throw with higher stakes. Morrison looked at the courtyard. He looked at his 12 grenades. He looked at the fading light and the Germans preparing to advance. He had no better options. He told Garrett to show him what he could do. The first throw was a test. Garrett selected a target, a gap in the rubble where Morrison had seen German helmets moving. The distance was approximately 70 feet. Garrett pulled the pin, stepped into the throw like he was on a mound in some forgotten Illinois ballpark, and released. The grenade flew in a flat arc, faster and more controlled than any Morrison had ever seen. It disappeared into the gap. 3 seconds later, the explosion sent debris flying, and the German helmets stopped moving. Morrison stared at Garrett. Garrett shrugged. "That was outside corner," he said. "I can do better." The engagement that followed was unlike anything in American infantry experience. Garrett became the sole offensive weapon of the platoon. The other soldiers provided covering fire, keeping German heads down while Garrett moved from window to window, identifying targets. He threw with a rhythm that reminded Morrison of watching baseball games before the war. Step, wind, release. Step, wind, release. Each grenade was a pitch. Each German position was a strike zone. Garrett wasn't throwing explosives. He was pitching them, with all the precision and muscle memory of 8 years on professional mounds. The second grenade hit a position 65 feet away, killing 2 Germans who had been setting up a machine gun. The third sailed 80 feet and detonated directly on top of a rubble pile, eliminating the observer who had been directing fire. The fourth, fifth, and sixth grenades walked down a line of defensive positions like a pitcher working through a batting order. The Germans didn't understand what was happening. They were experienced soldiers who had fought the Americans for months. They knew grenade ranges. They had positioned themselves specifically outside those ranges, confident that their distance provided protection. Now grenades were arriving with impossible accuracy, landing exactly where they would cause maximum damage. By the 7th throw, the German assault had stalled. By the 9th, it had reversed. Soldiers who had been preparing to charge were now scrambling for cover deeper in the ruins, trying to get beyond the range of whatever weapon the Americans possessed. They never identified the weapon. They thought it might be a mortar, or perhaps some new grenade launcher they hadn't encountered. The idea that a single soldier could throw a grenade 90 feet with pinpoint accuracy was outside their experience. It wasn't in any manual they had studied. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Garrett used all 12 grenades in 40 minutes. When the last one detonated, Morrison ordered his men to count the bodies visible in the courtyard. The count reached 29 before the fading light made verification impossible. 29 Germans killed by 12 grenades, a ratio that would have been extraordinary even for well-aimed rifle fire. For hand-thrown explosives, it was unprecedented. The surviving German soldiers withdrew in the darkness. They had started the engagement expecting to overwhelm a trapped American platoon. They left believing they had encountered some kind of specialized demolition unit with weapons they couldn't counter. Morrison's platoon held the position until relief arrived the following morning. All 18 Americans survived. When Morrison filed his after-action report, he struggled to describe what Garrett had done. The closest comparison he could find was that Garrett had treated the engagement like a baseball game, and the Germans had been standing too close to home plate. The report circulated through divisional intelligence, then to Army headquarters, and eventually to training command. Officers who read it were skeptical at first. The accuracy described seemed exaggerated, but when they interviewed Garrett and confirmed his minor league background, the skepticism turned to fascination. The Army began studying the relationship between athletic skills and combat applications. They found that former baseball players consistently outperformed their peers in grenade accuracy. The throwing motion taught in professional baseball, the mechanics of the shoulder and elbow working together for precision, transferred directly to grenade delivery. Within months, training protocols were updated. Grenade instruction began incorporating pitching mechanics. Recruiters were encouraged to identify men with baseball backgrounds for infantry roles. The connection between sport and combat, which had always been rhetorical, became tactical. Garrett himself received the Bronze Star for his actions at Bastogne. He survived the war and returned to Illinois, where he coached high school baseball for 32 years. He rarely spoke about the factory ruins or the 40 minutes that saved his platoon. When students asked about his military service, he would say only that the Army had finally found a use for his fastball. But the coaches who knew him understood something deeper. They watched him teach young pitchers the mechanics of the throw, the same mechanics he had used in December 1944. Step, wind, release. Control the motion. Trust the arm. Put the ball exactly where it needs to go. He was teaching them baseball. He was also teaching them how to survive. The lesson of that factory ruin extends beyond athletics. It is about the unexpected value of civilian skills in military contexts. The Army in 1944 saw soldiers as interchangeable components, trained to identical specifications. Garrett proved that individuality mattered, that a skill developed for entertainment could become a weapon more effective than anything in the supply chain. The 65 Germans who surrounded that position had done everything correctly according to their training. They had established overlapping fields of fire. They had maintained safe distances from grenade range. They had prepared a coordinated assault that should have overwhelmed the American defense. They failed because they couldn't account for one variable: a quiet kid from Illinois who had spent 8 years throwing baseballs and never made the majors. A man whose entire professional career had been considered a failure until the one afternoon when it became the most important skill in a Belgian factory ruin. 29 Germans died because Robert Garrett could hit a 2-foot window from home plate distance. 18 Americans lived because their lieutenant was desperate enough to let a replacement try something unconventional. The German commanders who reviewed the engagement never identified what had happened. Their reports described American grenades with unusual range and accuracy, possibly a new weapon system. They recommended caution when engaging fortified American positions. They never learned that the weapon system was one man with a minor league arm and nothing left to lose. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon on a battlefield isn't in any manual. It's a skill nobody thought to ask about. It's a talent that seemed useless until the moment it became essential. It's a pitcher who never made the majors, but threw the game of his life in a ruined factory outside Bastogne. And when those grenades started landing exactly where Robert Garrett wanted them, the Germans learned a lesson that no military academy teaches. The rules of engagement only work when everyone knows what the other side can do. When someone brings a skill from outside the system, the rules become suggestions. Step, wind, release. 29 dead in 40 minutes. That's a hell of a final season. If this story changed how you think about unexpected skills in crisis, hit the subscribe button right now. One click tells the algorithm that forgotten heroes deserve to be remembered for the talents nobody expected to matter. Drop a comment below and tell me what civilian skill you have that might translate to an impossible situation. We all have something we don't realize is valuable. Hit the notification bell, because we're covering another soldier who brought an unexpected talent to the battlefield and changed the outcome of an engagement nobody thought they could win. I'll see you in the next one.